sharing the inaugural address and laying down the background to the whole workshop. He will also be chairing the very first session. So with that, I again thank you so much for coming for this particular workshop this morning. And I would urge you to stay to the end. We have erudite speakers right at the end, including ending with Shri Gurumurthy, who is consented to be delivering the valedictory address. So over to you, sir.
Thank you. Given the introduction, I of course endorse Sanjeet's introduction. No, we're going to make a presentation. Where is it?
Yeah, the PowerPoint.
What I will go straight into is to give you an overview of the model, and as Sanjeev said, we look forward to all of you, contributing now and maybe later to developing and fleshing out the models. It has kind of two purposes in a way. One is, of course, within the country, as Sanjeev said, but it also has the objective of presenting India to the world. So you may like to keep both those objectives in mind. So, where are we? On karo? Okay. So because it's a slightly long presentation and I think we are running a little late, but it's okay. So I will go straight into it. And if there is time, maybe we can have a few clarificatory type of questions. Of course, the detailed discussion will take place over the day. So, where do I point to move it? Okay. So the model is grounded in Bharat's philosophy and culture. And what are these? I want to give you a little background to this. Normally economists don't think of it, but one has studied a little bit of history and philosophy, and it's useful to connect it. So one of the important points here is that citizens are social beings, not just economic agents. So for example, personal rights go along with social responsibility. We have the family and community plays a big role in our culture. Secondly, of course, the economy and society has evolved. So traditionally, these were part of the spiritual obligation, but of course now we have other concepts of trusteeship, NGOs, NPOs, which all have a role in society and in the economy. Role of market economy. Is there anything unique about the Indian model? Yes, I think the middle, we generally, our approach through history and during independence has been kind of a middle economic path based on our culture and avoiding ideological extremes, So for example, to kind of take a caricature, communists believe that markets are exploitative, but government is perfect. Extreme form of capitalism believes the opposite, that government is exploitative and market perfect. So our approach, and this is highlighted by what used to be called and perhaps still is called Buddha's middle path. So this is deeply embedded in our culture that we try to follow some kind of a middle path. And so role of government in society, the government has responsibility to society, community and families. Okay. So the third element, of course, or fourth element is, of course, that since independence, we have a constitutional plural democracy. And again, many people may not know. I actually learned of this in the last 3-4 years. We have a long history, as good or as bad as that of Greece and others in terms of Mahajanapadas, the Janapadas which were there. Of course, these were very limited and very special forms of democracy, but from my reading of it, as good or as bad as anything which was there in the Greek republics, etc. And finally, of course, we do believe that Constitution is not just about rights but also national duties. So again, I think that's a very Indian concept. No, I didn't move that. I didn't. क्या हो रहा है? अपने आप मूव हो रहा है. मैंने मूव नहीं किया, क्यों मूव? पिछला वाला वहाँ से ऑपरेट कर रहे हो. तो यहाँ से कुछ नहीं होता. Okay, go back. Okay, and one basic concept which I learned from philosophy, ages ago, literally half a century ago, is this universal connectivity. I don't know how to describe it, but that basic essence of humanity, animal, nature, planets. There's something underlying it which connects us all. I think that's the best way to put it in modern terms. So ecology, climate, simplicity, self-sufficiency, all kind of part of our history and culture. Next. So that is just kind of way of background. Now getting to the more economic parts of it. So basically we think of the model in terms of inclusive growth is clearly the objective which arises from all that what I have said before, and I think of it in three basic elements of this. One is Indic market economy, the second is what I call Antodaya empowerment, and finally a kind of realism and pragmatism, which kind of arises from that middle path which I told you about. That doesn't mean that you don't pay attention to theory, to everything that is out there, but you are realistic and pragmatic about things. So what does Indic market economy mean? Understanding the strengths and weaknesses of both government and private sector, recognizing that these are dynamic over time and place, they are not fixed. Ideologues generally fix it and just forever they assume it's the same, these things change, and then try to build on the strengths of each. Under the empowerment, I think one basic element which comes from what I said earlier is that it tries to preserve the strengths and diversity of India, that is Bharat. So I think that's how it relates to what I said before. And of course, realism and pragmatism in everything, but particularly in the macro field. Next. Okay, so role of government and private sector. This is something which has evolved, and I think which we are much clearer about now. Basically, the clarity I think has come over the last 10 years or so. So promoting the strengthening synergies between government and private sector, public-private partnership. So private sector drives the economic and employment growth. It's supposed to innovate, invest and compete, while government creates the efficient markets and sustained growth environment by providing public goods infrastructure and some kind of optimal development and regulation. And finally, of course, the role of the NPOs and NGOs, which is often discussed and certainly is a part of this, and the element that government has to finance and ensure welfare of the poor and needy, but in some sense that a bureaucracy, is not very well suited to reach the last man. So the NPOs, NGOs have a big role when there is very small elements, reaching, let's say, a disabled person in a village or something. You really have to have people who from the community, etc., to supplement and complement the social welfare. Next. I take two slides to tell you, because this is not well known, that some of the reforms that have come from over the last 10 years, I think it's important. I don't see much discussion of it anywhere, so I'm maybe going a bit more deeply than I would have otherwise. But the promotion of competition, incentivize private enterprise and drive efficiency, EODB you've all heard of, and a kind of special emphasis or a different emphasis on tradable goods and emphasis services versus non-tradable. So in tradables, the open economy has a role. You hear sometimes that this government is increasing protection. I think that is not fully true. There are elements of it which I'll come to in a little while. And it's a difficult path between promoting competition and this element of pragmatism. The non-tradable goods infrastructure, I think we've taken it very far. We've been innovators in it. So unbundling infrastructure into competitive and monopoly elements, making sure that competition is there wherever possible, and then regulating the monopoly. Other elements like competitive auctions, I think how far we have gone over these last 10 years, not just telecom, but mining and many other sectors, I think it's, and the PPP and other contract. So in terms of auctioning of non-tradables and kind of oligopoly elements has been very good. And of course, regulating potential monopolies, not just traditional ones, but also the network part of it, which is again kind of an evolution and modernization of the structure. Next. Mention some of the things which have been new. The focus on imperfect and missing markets. I think when we present to the world, if you look at America as kind of an other extreme, I think we have been clearly focusing much more on the imperfection and missing markets. For example, the ENAM which has been created. Clearly, the agricultural markets are not up to what we need, so we have created an ENAM. Traditionally, we've also focused on agricultural R&D, extension services, etc. So wherever markets are missing, I'm just giving these examples to indicate what I mean. Rural market institutions like FPOs, MSCs, etc. Special programs of creating markets for MSMEs like Udayam and ONDC. I hope everybody is familiar with ONDC, which is a platform market where all small and large can compete, and informal labor market. So again, my point here is not that we are perfect. In fact, part of the meeting is for you to discuss what is good, what is not so good, what we need to do in the future. It's just to give you an idea and a direction. So the Shram portal has been created. This information asymmetry and moral hazard issues, I think again, this is an area which is quite focused and new in India, which we emphasize. So health and education. Since I joined the government, I came across this incredible Diksha program. I don't have time, but those who are interested, I can tell you later privately. The skills, the NSDC, Atal Innovation Mission. Again, please don't take it that I'm saying everything is perfect, but I think the effort is there, the direction is there, and the idea, as Sanjeev mentioned, and part of it is for you to take this out and give us feedback and give us suggestions. Getting the right information to the right person at the right time. I think this is a very, very important element, especially for low income, low educated people, because really the upper end can take care of itself. All of us, when we need something, we go to Google, we can find anything. But that's not true of the low income and the less educated. So the idea is that we must provide the right information to them. Okay, next. That's a long thing, but I'm sorry. As I said, I have the impression that not too many people are aware of all the things which have been done on the market reforms. So I'm taking a little more time. I'll just put these down and maybe not next one. Next. Okay. So I'm listing a whole bunch of reforms to give you an idea of the enormous amount of reforms that have been done since 29-20. I was part of the 91 reforms, and the slogan we kind of coined was that a crisis is too important a tragedy to waste. And that's exactly what I was not in government, that's exactly what I said in 2020 when the pandemic hit. And the interesting thing is a huge bunch of reforms have occurred, which again people are not aware of. I'm not going to separate them out, I'm just listing them. So factor markets, public sector, all the products and services which were not liberalized earlier have been liberalized. Institutional reforms you're familiar with, IBC, MPC in in RBI, the GST, the resource auctions, as I mentioned earlier, huge acceptance. This was, I personally struggled for 10 years to introduce auctions in mines, in coal mines, in telecom. But this has all happened in the last 10 years. Now, every sector where it's needed, where there's no perfect market, there are auctions of resources. Abolishing outdated laws, this you're familiar with, bureaucratic reform, social welfare, there are a whole bunch of things. Next one. So to summarize, in a sense, the policies reforms are, next one, no, previous, yeah. So it's systematic, going through each element of economics and seeing where the problems are, where we need to liberalize, where we need to reform. One lesson of that is, okay, if you can evaluate what the effects of these are, if you can tell us where we still haven't done it, we are missing, it's open, my doors are always open to you, that's part of my job, okay? And again, emphasizing what Sanjeev said. Institutional reform I mentioned, bureaucratic reform, so again gone back here. Sorry. Sorry. Maybe I got confused. Okay. Unique digital public goods. This again you're familiar with. Again, I listed them, the stacks, the DigiLocker. All these have huge potential. My nephew was visiting and he asked me, have you used DigiLocker? I said, no. So he said, give me your phone. I'll just put everything of yours on DigiLocker. In 5 minutes, he had put everything there. And it's amazing. Now, once he put it there, I also say, okay, maybe I'll use it. I'm too old to learn all these things. But it's happening. It's out there. Okay? The health stack, health record. Again, incomplete. Long way to go in my thing. But all these things are happening. The electronic markets I already mentioned. Next. Okay, so very limited outcomes. That, again, I urge all of you to tell us what are the outcomes, but let me briefly, from what evidence we have, just give you 2 slides on what I have seen. So one is that in terms of per capita income, I've given you some statistics there that we have increased from about 34% of world average in 2014 to about 41% in 2022. Global rank has correspondingly improved from 142 to 128. Clearly, the pandemic was a terrible shock. Clearly, that has slowed down our growth. But these statistics tell you, we may have slowed down, but the world also slowed down because of the pandemic, and we are still making progress. That is the intent of these 2 points here, which are taken from the left. Absolute poverty virtually eliminated with food transfers. Dr. Bhalla will tell you more about that in his session. What I call LMIC, the 3.2 poverty line, it's roughly 18% now. And the rest of it, the pandemic stuff, you kind of know. Next. Employment. A lot of discussion on employment. What I tried to do was just look at the hard data, which is the PLFS data from 2017-18 to whatever time it's available. The interesting things, one of course, the CWS, which is really the closest thing to a job creation thing we know, has clearly increased, by roughly 2.3% per year over the 1, 2, 3, 5 or 6 years. Real wages, this is the interesting one. So when we look at the totals, I think they are very misleading. In fact, I have to thank Dr. Bhalla for pointing this out to me. But again, I solicit work and more information on these aspects from everybody. When you divide the data into these 3 well-known categories of casual workers, salaried workers, and self-employed, the amazing thing which I saw there was the real wages of casual workers increased by roughly 5% a year during this period. I was quite shocked because that 5% is probably a little higher than per capita GDP. Of course, we can get the exact one, but the point is a generic one. So basically, people keep talking about trickle down. It's not trickle down. This is not trickle down for me. It's trickle up, because the real wages of other salaried workers barely increased. So this is not trickle down. This is trickle up. There's of course issues of skilling in demand and skills. That is what my impression is, and which is what I'm trying to get into deeper, to find out what is going on with skills. There's something wrong there, something which has to be improved. And finally, the self-employed were the ones where there was a small gradual decline of about minus 0.4 per annum over this period, which I've shown you on the left. And the interesting thing is that I happened to put this in some briefing to my boss, and without my knowing it, a month later, there was a new program, Vishwakarma. So the self-employed can only improve their incomes by upgrading their skills. That's the key there. And the reaction, I'm just giving this to you, I don't talk about, but that shows that the intent is there, the will is there, and what we need is more information and analysis from all of you to take these things forward. Next one. Antar there, I don't want to go through all the thing. There is, I think I'll just point out one or two things. It's the middle one. They're multi-dimensional, multifaceted. And I have to mention the Prime Minister because it's very important. I think his approach is that I cannot leave any group behind. And I think that's part of our culture approach. That is why I gave you that thing in the beginning. It's not just him. This is our way. This is how we've developed. This is our democracy. If you go to the West, it's all individual. Okay, here we say no. There are groups X, Y, Z. We have a huge diversity of people. Geographically, even culturally. The old slogan of unity in diversity. So there is this feeling that we cannot let any group behind. So there are programs for everything. Having been trained in Western economics, I used to think of that as inefficient. Okay, and many of academics probably still do. But it's a challenge. I think we shouldn't overdo it. We should have as many general schemes as possible and not target schemes to everybody. But I think a certain amount of that is important. Now, of course, gender one, which I mentioned, there, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, etc. Gender is clear, right? It's 50% of the population, so there's no question. Okay, to focus more on female empowerment, and caste and SC/ST is an old one, which has been going on from thing. But what I am saying is that it's more than that. That it's been reaching down. Next one. Finally, on this aspect, the empowerment. I think this is new. This is something which again I'm emphasizing because I think this is not understood. It is not just welfare in the first sense, which I call Antodaya, but also in terms of empowerment, okay, which is building skills, building capabilities, building talent, okay. So empowering everybody to develop their talent and their income earning capacity. Again, I am not saying that everything is done perfectly, that there's no scope for improvement, there's a lot of scope. But I think one has to understand what is going on, see where it is good or bad, and then tell us where we need to do more. Again, I won't read all this, but I mentioned the Diksha one, which has really impressed me. For those who are interested, I can tell you privately. I think I've taken too much time. How much time have I taken?
It's okay.
Chalo. Okay. Multi-dimensional poverty indicators, more or less, in fact, corresponding to the international ones. So the important thing here, the net result, improvement everywhere, geographically, poorer states, all this we've already done in NITI. I just wanted to put it here. But the interesting one which I want to point out, which number is not here actually, that according to MDI, the poverty rate is 15%. Now, those of you who were following this thing carefully had a LMIC of 18%. Very close. Okay, that one is actually higher. I mean, more poverty. This one is lower. That's the main point here. Next. Realism, pragmatism, just to give you one or two things, the macro fiscal, we'll have a big discussion I think we are going to have, right? So that we'll all discuss. But everywhere this is true. Now again, as you as economists all know, there's a danger, right? Of becoming too pragmatic and being driven by just pulls and pressures everywhere. So I accept that. Again, I think it is for us economists to say, okay, here we are going too far, what we call populism or whatever you want to call it. A certain amount of it happens in every, I've seen 20 elections. Every time there is a little bit here and there is okay, everybody does it, but there should be limits, and I think it is our job as economists to point out when it is going beyond. Pragmatism is good, but excessive drive driven by contingencies, etc., is not good. Next. Okay, I think I'll just skip that. I think all of you understand the nature of pragmatism. I'll go to the final one. Next. Okay, so this is the outlook. So obviously we have to look forward from here. I think I've already said that in the beginning. So just these, I'm sure all of you will have kind of critical things to say, but our objective is fast growth in per capita income. Private investment, public goods infrastructure, human capital will drive this. Our target is to become a high-income country by mid-century. The inclusive growth and empowerment is a very critical part of this. Equality of opportunity is how I like to put it, whether it's basic education, skills, entrepreneurship, gender equality. The way I see it, they are my colleagues who look at it from social perspective. I look at it as an unused resource. You have all these women who have been trained, who are educated, who have brains, and we are not using them. So how can we use it? Tomorrow I'll be at a seminar where another workshop where I'll be discussing it. Upgrade rural human capital. Here, in my view, the digital economy is going to be critical. Reaching them, e-education, e-health, e-skilling is going to be a critical part of this thing. And of course, equalization of the quality of public goods between all categories. Generally, I remember a World Bank study 10-15 years ago where they said even public goods are unequally distributed. So that is certainly on our agenda to make sure that the poor, middle class, all have equal access. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And that was a very wide gamut of discussion which you have initiated. I'm sure it will be taken forward in this workshop. With this, I would invite Dr. Charan from EGROW. And as I mentioned, EGROW is